do you think about the Laker team now?
You follow the box scores of the games every day? Just the Lakers.
You're kidding. That is really a compliment. I was pleased to see you smile at the top of our show, because once the game starts, you have a game face. You don't smile much out there.
I don't think you have to do things for money anymore.
Correct.
All right, Laker fans, I'm excited to announce that I've traded Darius and Tom for Nate Duncan, along with, future considerations. Very excited about what this means for the Laker film room. Now, freaking DeMarcus Cousins to New Orleans for Buddy Hield, a first-round pick this year, a second-round pick, Tyreke Evans, and Langston Galloway. Darius, dude, what do you think?
So first of all, what the the King story? And second of all, that in your little intro there, that must make me Buddy Hield? Because I'm guessing
no. You're Tyreke Evans.
Oh, I'm Tyreke Evans.
Yeah, you had promise in like 2011.
Got you.
And Tommy's Buddy Hield. So yeah,
sure. I got you. Maybe one of your dogs can be Langston Galloway.
Right, there you go.
Ouch.
Yeah, that was pretty brutal. What did Langston Galloway ever do to you? That was
no. I'm saying
took a moment,
like, I'm saying we'll trade one of your dogs out and he can find a better situation with a better owner, right?
Oh yeah, I don't think Sacramento is. No. See, Langston Galloway is going to freaking Sacramento, so I think your analogy falls apart right there. So, yeah. So talk to me, my man. What do you think about the trade?
Yeah, we were saying this before, but it's a stunning sort of return for Cousins. I think that Cousins is a top 10 player to me. If he's not top 10, then he's in that 10 to 15 range. And he's just so talented. We've seen it firsthand as Lakers fans, right?
Yeah.
That he's, regardless of who the Lakers have thrown at him, he is eating their lunch and taking their milk money, and then used the milk money to buy 40s to dump out on the curb for the death of the team, right?
Right.
So Cousins is just such a good player, and to basically get Hield and a first-round pick, because I think that's essentially what this deal is just a stunner to me. That's the return that they've gotten for arguably the best big man in the game. He's clearly, one of the most talented big men. He can do it all offensively, and when he's engaged defensively, he's not like Marc Gasol or DeAndre Jordan or anything like that, but he can be a plus on that side and not like this net negative consistently, regardless of what his effort level or how dialed in he is. And I just, he was in the All-Star game this year and last year, and he's been on Team USA. This is not a slouch. He's not a guy who you just say, oh, well, that's Mercurial Cousins, and you no, man, he's like he's better than that, right? For sure. So I just don't see it really from the King side, besides them just saying, okay, we want to rebuild our culture and do it without Cousins and tank, basically. That's what this is to me.
Well, and you and I were talking before we even got on, but Philly has the right to swap picks with them. So even if Sacramento loses every game from here on out, they have no chance to get a top pick in the draft, because that just Philly's just, unless Philly and Sacramento get like the 1 and 2 pick or whatever, so there's not even a benefit for them tanking this year. The return is what's remarkable to me. The fact that they finally decided to move on from Cousins. That's something that's been rumored for so long that it's funny. It had been rumored for so long, and yet it feels like the trade happened so fast.
Yeah.
So it's kind of ironic in that respect.
He got traded on All-Star Sunday. He was
he was in the game. Yeah.
He was in the game today, and then he got traded. When I told my wife that he got traded today, I said, DeMarcus Cousins got traded, and she said, during the All-Star game. She said,
Right.
She said, "Is that legal?
Yeah.
Like, can you do that?"
Yeah, man. So the speed of it is, definitely surprising, and how quickly it all kind of seemed to materialize. But what's so remarkable to me is so the Kings finally decide that they're going to deal him, right? So what's the natural thing that happens after that is Vlade and his people get on the phones and start getting trade offers from everyone around the league. Well, that's the best that they had. That was the best offer that they had. And, you had mentioned again off air that you'd heard that the Kings really liked Buddy Hield, which is totally a Kings thing to do, is to really like Buddy Hield. But even no matter how much like his biggest fan, you gotta figure that with the talent that Cousins possesses that you outlined at the beginning, that he could get way more than Buddy Hield. Like if someone came in our mentions and said Buddy Hield and a mid-first and some salary ballast, like we'd be like, oh God, please leave me alone. And I even tweeted that out, right? Like I'm like, Sacramento just murdered basketball bloggers' mentions for years to come, because every crazy idea that anybody ever comes up with is going to be followed by, well, look what the Kings got for Cousins, right?
Well, this whole idea, even when it was even Hield and 2 first-round picks, I was sort of laughing that off as like, okay, like talks might start there, but if they end there, that's going to be a joke, right? Like, I'm just because the fact is that the Pelicans, and we'll get to them in a bit, I think, but the Pelicans are essentially going all in. They just traded for DeMarcus Cousins to join Anthony freaking Davis, right? They didn't even give up Drew Holiday in this trade, right? And so they did give up shooting, right? They lost wing and backcourt depth. Well, I mean, even if Hield isn't a shooter yet,
he's competent at it for sure. But I mean, dudes like
and
Anthony
they lost
Davis's
Galloway.
Age, yeah.
And Galloway can play some. I think that he's a fine backup guard. There's lots of smart
Knicks man.
Well, I think there were a lot of smart Knicks fans that I follow who were sort of disappointed to see Galloway go as just sort of this reserve guard option who can come into the game and do some things, right? Like I mean, he's not Tony Douglas, right? So, and then you give up Tyreek, who, like injury prone and all of that, but another viable ball handler. And so, like, we'll get into the Pelicans soon, but just like, man, you're saying it like all the trade machine junkies are like, really? This is all it took, right? And I think you had mentioned this earlier to me, but it sort of speaks to maybe Cousins' value around the league.
And I don't know how you can come to another conclusion. I mean, it's obvious that he's so talented that, a team like Boston, right? What would they have had to give up? Just the Brooklyn pick and whatever salary ballast they needed to include within that, that would have superseded by a ton what they got from the Pelicans. And they had the opportunity to get DeMarcus Cousins and pair him with everybody in their existing core, and they didn't do it. And I think that really speaks to, and that's not just Boston. There are 29 other teams around the NBA. We'll get to the Lakers, but they said no on Brandon Ingram, which we'll get to in a bit. But every team in the NBA said, one of the, who most people consider to be the best center in the league, everybody went, I'm good. That's astounding.
Yeah, I think the attitude stuff is real. I think that the locker room stuff is real. I also think, too, that maybe the offers were low because that's what teams thought that they could get or that they could give up to a front office that's run by the guys who run the Kings front office, right? Like, I think that there's a lot of variables here at play that sort of speak to what the final end deal was. And, they probably were getting low ball offers, right? Like, just look at what happened in the last couple of years with the Kings, right? The way that Sam Hinkie basically fleeced them in that Nick Stauskas trade so that they can open up cap room to sign Rajon Rondo.
Oy.
Right, like so there's lots of things. So I don't think that the Kings front office reputation is well earned. Mm-hmm. I think teams are totally willing to say, no, we'll give you this. Right? Mm-hmm. And then when the counter comes, they're like, oh, well, no, we'll give you this. Right? And look at what the Pelicans gave up. So I don't think that perception of them is going away anytime soon after this deal.
Oh, certainly not. And but by the same token, those teams are competing with each other just as much, if not more, than they are negotiating with Sacramento, right? Because Vlade is calling around the league and saying, give me your best offer for Cousins. He's getting traded tonight or within the next 48 hours. So give me the best that you got. And then at the end of that, you sort through and you pick your top three, and then you and your top people in the organization debate the one that you like the best. So I totally get, and it's totally valid that they are they're marks to the rest of the league. They're people that can be taken advantage of, and they've proven that over and over again. But still, with a guy like Cousins, who's on talent alone at the very least, is going to have 29 other teams interested in him. And the fact that that's all that they could come away with is just astounding. Even like it's new levels of ineptitude for them. But I want to flip it on its head a bit and then take a look at it from the New Orleans angle. We've seen this move away from bigger players over the last, and building your team around bigs. And if there was ever a time to buck the convention of small ball and spacing, and even in both of their cases, they can both shoot competently from the outside. This is the team that's going to be able to do it. You're talking, in terms of just sheer talent, Anthony Davis and DeMarcus Cousins are two of the top 4, 5, and that's being conservative, of the best big men in the league. So what is this team, and we'll get into the Lakers stuff in a second, but this warrants discussion. What is this team capable of with those two guys?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how balanced they are offensively from a lineup perspective. We mentioned earlier that in terms of a minutes played standpoint, Davis obviously leads them in minutes. So Galloway was 7th in minutes played. Evans was 11th in minutes played, but he's only played in 26 games. Right. So he's played in like half their games, and he's still 11th in minutes played. So per game, Evans was playing about 18 minutes a game. And so it's interesting to me to see right now, when you look at their roster, they've got Davis now, they've got Solomon Hill, they've got Drew Holiday, they've got Terrence Jones, who is an interesting piece to me now, right? Because he's shown some flashes again this year of what he was supposed to be coming out of Kentucky and what Houston thought that they had with him. And now he's essentially going to be a reserve, and who knows how much he's even going to have the ball in his hands, right? And so their guard depth is really weird to me at this point. Besides Holiday, and so they're only 2.5 games out of the 8th seed. One of the teams that they have to jump is the Kings. So obviously the Kings, we would imagine they're going to free fall a bit here, right? They just traded their best player, and they're only a half a game behind the Blazers, right? So let's take the Kings out of the equation, and so the Pelicans will have to jump the Blazers and the Nuggets in order to get to 8th, and they're 2.5 games behind Denver now. I don't know how it's going to work, right? Like on basketball Twitter, you hear a lot about like Point Boogie, right? Because he likes to sort of grab and go and bring the ball up and sort of initiate sets. They run a lot of drag action with him as like a trailer as well, where they will reverse the ball through him and then he'll make reads at the top of the key and sometimes, not pass at all, right? Because he's got the ball and he's just going to attack his man. And I'm interested in seeing sort of how this all meshes, especially under Alvin Gentry, who has thrived most in locker rooms that are very kumbaya, right? His best teams were those Nash-led Suns, and he didn't bring in Steve Nash right now.
No, he's not the manager of personalities for sure.
Hey guys, I got some breaking news coming in. This is producer Tom. Everybody, how's it going? Mark Stein just tweeted that the 2017 first rounder going to from New Orleans to Sacramento is top 3 protected. Discuss as you will.
Yeah, so it's an even worse set of circumstances. I mean, as you're saying, the ability for them to hop into that 8th spot is like that's theirs for the taking if they want it. But they're a totally mismatched roster right now that I wonder if they're if there's another deal, kind of, because they've got, Davis, Cousins, Omer Ashik, Jones, as you brought up, Alexis Ajinça, and then like no guards. So you got to figure, I'm looking at that, trying to look at that from a Lakers standpoint, but there really isn't. I like T. Jones, but I don't know if I like him enough to flip Lou for him. And
he doesn't make any money. He signed like a minimum deal.
That's right.
This year.
Yeah, that's right.
So,
so
that's a problem with Jones,
sure.
right? Is that even though he's probably
he's hard to trade from that
6 or 7 best players, there's no one to deal him for. Like guys who make the minimum are throw-ins, right? So you'd need ballast,
right,
to attach with him for something else, and that complicates things.
Sure. So the Pelicans are certainly going to be an interesting test case for the a bigger, perhaps different style of play than everybody else is playing. If they get that 8th seed, a Golden State, New Orleans first round repeat of a couple of years ago, but with kind of a different twist on it with Cousins in the fold, that's going to be a very interesting matchup. But I want to turn it a bit to the Lakers. So, Woj tweeted out that the Lakers and Kings had been in discussions over the last 48 hours, and where it fell apart was the Kings asked for Brandon Ingram, and the Lakers said no, and pretty much from the sounds of it, that was that. So a 2-part question for you is, was that the right move to not flip Ingram for Cousins? And secondly, what would your offer for Cousins be if you were in the Laker front office?
Yeah, and so if I were trading for Cousins, I would not include Ingram, and I would not include Deangelo Russell. I just think that their upsides, they may never be as good as Cousins, and that may be likely, right? Like you may not have any of the attitude issues or whatever, but their talent level may never be as high as what Cousins offers, right? Like,
and that's not the only element of the equation. I agree with that, but I think that there are financial and timeline considerations within that as well. But but I do agree with your point that that's things have to go right and very well for them to meet Cousins' level of capability.
Yeah, and they're furthest away from getting paid, right, in terms of their timeline, and they are the highest draft picks, right? And so their pedigrees are basically the best. And so to me, while I don't think you would call it giving up on them to trade them as part of a deal for clearly an all-star level player, right? Like you're sort of trading potential for establishment, right? But if I were making a deal, I would probably start off with Jordan Clarkson and Julius Randle as my basis for a trade for DeMarcus Cousins. There may be additional pieces that you tack on. Like if you add Lou Williams to that deal, then maybe you get something else back from the Kings, right? Who's not as good as Lou Williams. there's a variety of directions that you can go in, but in the trade machine, Randall and Clarkson for Cousins actually works,
Right.
as like a 2-for-1 trade, and that would probably be where I'd start, just because I think that they're the pieces that are most likely to be negatively impacted if they're still on the team when Cousins comes.
Am I just like a homer, or is that in and of itself a better offer than the ones that the Kings accepted?
So Jordan Clarkson, so Buddy Hield is 23 years old, right? Mm-hmm. I'm going to do a little bit of Googling here, but I have a feeling that Jordan Clarkson is not too much older than Buddy Hield.
Yeah, he's 24 and change.
Yeah.
So
So I mean, theoretically, you would hope that Buddy Hield, who was taken 6th in last year's draft, ends up being a better player than Jordan Clarkson. And I mean, in terms of like elite one skill ability, like maybe Hield shooting will ultimately trump, the things that Clarkson does well in terms of athleticism and getting to the hole and other things, right? But will the player that the Kings get from the Pelicans pick end up being better than Julius Randle?
He's going to be like the 15th pick in the draft.
Right, like that seems doubtful to me. Not now.
It does.
Right? Like that's just like projecting based off of like draft positioning and things like that. We all know that, you can draft guys in the teens who end up being really good players, right?
You've seen who the Kings draft, right?
Yes, I have. So I'm saying players get drafted at that level, not Kings players get drafted, right? Like,
yeah, right.
So
God, there's such a mess. Like, there's so many like layers of like how awful this is for them, and I don't want to spend the whole podcast on the Kings, but I'm just like.
It's easy to go back to it though, right? Like every time you think about it, it's like it's sort of like like a nagging like
it's like and that. It's
yes.
like and that. Yeah. So how far beyond the Randall and Clarkson do you throw in Zubats?
I probably don't.
I agree.
I think that Zubats is going to be a good pro, and he's 7 feet tall with soft hands and all these other things that we've discussed ad nauseum before. I just think that even if you have Cousins long term and Zubats ends up not being a piece that you keep long term, I just don't think you throw him in to this trade, right? Like he's going to be super cheap as a second round pick for not only this year but the next 2 years, and I think that if he develops the way that he's showing that he can develop, that he may end up being a piece that you can leverage later for something else.
Sure.
And so I'm not in the mood of just giving up assets just to make the pot sweeter, right? And maybe that's why the deal just didn't work out. I just saw something that Ramona Shelburne put out, and she basically said that her understanding of the discussions between the Lakers and the Kings was that the Kings said, we want Brandon Ingram, and the Lakers said no, and that things really didn't go much further than that, right? And so this idea of like, oh, they were in discussions for over 2 days, maybe that was the case, and maybe they kept checking back in like, hey, you ready to give him up now? And it's kind of like, right? Like, no, we're not. But yeah, I would like, to me, Randall and Clarkson is about as far as I'm willing to go. And I really like Randall. And so to me, to sort of like give him up, but I'm also very much of the mind that because we've had this discussion before, that when you're building a team, you sort of need to find all of the right pieces. And if you're adding another ball-dominant player at any position, and you're not giving up Russell or Ingram, I think Randall's probably a piece that's going to need to be involved in a trade to sort of offset that, just because that's a lot of guys who really need the ball and do their best with the ball in their hands, either like creating or whatever. And I'm just not sure if Randall's ever going to really change from that too much, right? Like he may get away from it some, but I don't really see that too much.
Sure, yeah, and really that's what I would give up as well as that Clarkson Randall package. There's some financial considerations in that as well. I'm fine with the contract that Clarkson is on. I think it's pretty commensurate with his production on the court. Randall's coming up for what I consider to be a kind of scary extension, whether it's going to be this summer if they offer him the earlier extension or going forward. And I've documented on this podcast, I've documented several of my concerns with him going forward. But yeah, that's what I would offer. I think if the Lakers didn't pursue something outside of Ingram and offer an alternative, like kind of along those lines, if not the exact same thing, just something of that ilk. I think that's probably some opportunity lost there by the Lakers if they didn't offer that. But at the end of the day, the rest of the league didn't offer that for DeMarcus Cousins either. Based simply on the strength of what they ended up having to accept from Sacramento's end. So, it's
I would say
it's interesting. Yeah, go ahead, man.
I was just going to say one more piece on that too is sort of the stuff that Mark Stein was reporting about what Cousins' agent was saying, and that he's unlikely to extend with any team who trades for him, and this, that, and the other, and so. The work that agents do behind the scenes when deals like this happen, I think, is very important to sort of shaping the structure of deals.
That's fair.
And so if there were a 30 for 30, down the line, like on
this would be a good one.
Like on this deal, I would imagine that there are lots of things that aren't being reported today, which sort of influenced how things went. Like, I think it's easy to get the jokes off, right? Like, oh, Vlade loves Hield,
sure.
and this is what they got again, right? They got jobbed again. But that's another story for another day. What I am interested in discussing, and I know you are too, is that, okay, so the Lakers didn't make a big deal today. They did not trade for DeMarcus Cousins. They decided not to include Brandon Ingram in a deal, but the trade deadline is 4 days away, or by the time this posts, it'll be 4 days away, right? It's this upcoming Thursday, and the Lakers have reportedly been active in deals. I know that there have been reports on things, and we had discussed this a little bit offline. And so, what's a realistic deal that maybe you're hearing or you've read about, or that you think would actually work, that's out there for the Lakers right now? Because I think we're both in agreement that just because this deal did not happen does not mean that they should sort of back off from exploring trade options, right?
Oh, certainly not. So the guy that's the one we're all looking to is Lou Williams, right? Where he's been rumored, with Washington. There's been some Houston rumors, and just kind of general interest around the league. The one with the Wizards seems to be the one that has the most legs at this moment. But as well as I do that with the Lakers, especially, by the time we hear them, a lot of times they're dead already. The trade rumors, but this is the first time that I can remember where I think a Lakers trade is more likely than not. The first time really since the Ramon Sessions deal. Back that year, that was someone tweeted that. I think the Lakers Legacy podcast, I think they tweeted that out earlier in the day, where it was like, it was a trade that made sense that ended up actually happening. So the rumored trade with Lou is Lou to the Wizards for Trey Burke, Thomas Satoransky, and their first round pick this year, which currently sits at the 24 position, I believe. So, that's something for me. For Burke and Satoransky are more like to make the salaries work. Satoransky is a bit interesting, and I think Trey Burke is probably close to out of the league in the very near future. But really, you make that trade, the asset in that is the pick. I'd like to see if we could do better than the 24th pick, but I don't know the other offers that are out there, and I really don't think you're going to do much better than like the high teens. So, so that's kind of like the main one. And then I've heard some Houston scuttlebutt about they really want to double down on scoring at will and have Lou Williams coming off of the bench to kind of add to something that they already do incredibly well. So I don't know, man. What's your take? Let's talk about the Washington deal specifically. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I'm right in line with you. I think the first round pick would be the asset. So Satoransky's an interesting player. He's only played about 550 minutes for the Wizards this year. I think per game, which is right around, I think, that's about 100 minutes less than Burke, for example. Per game, 14.2 minutes, 3 points, almost 2 assists, almost 2 rebounds. From what I've seen of him, I saw some of his stuff like preseason because he had a little bit of bounce and he was dunking a little bit in the layup lines, and he's got a little bit of playmaking. He's sort of an interesting prospect because he's got some size, so he's 6'7", 210, but he's sort of a playmaking shooting guard, right? He's got a 9 PER or whatever. So I mean, let's not get excited about a guy like this, right?
Sure. Yeah.
And
he shouldn't be a rotation
guy.
Yeah.
And I agree with you that I would like to see if the Lakers could squeeze a first round pick or even a different sort of talent out of them if they're making that deal, right? And so I would if I were actually making a deal with Washington and they were saying, well, how about Burke and Satoransky and a first round pick, I might say, how about Kelly Oubre and Trey Burke? Right?
Sure. I would too. I just don't think they make that deal.
Me neither. That's why Washington may not be the right trade partner. Now, that's not to say that, in the past, Mitch Kupchak has sort of caught flack for being a guy who's maybe overvalued his assets or not pulled the trigger on deals that were out there because he didn't like the return. There was a lot of stuff on Pau Gasol like that over the years where they just ultimately didn't end up trading him and then saw him walk in free agency. They're not in that position with Lou Williams right now because he's not a free agent this summer. But
right.
But I think that it'd be good to sell high on Lou Williams right now because he's essentially having the best year of his career. And so,
right.
Which speaks to sort of, you mentioned Houston, you mentioned Washington. I think a team like Charlotte, a team like OKC, the Thunder, there's probably another team or two out there who sort of fit that mold of teams that are, either pushing for the playoffs or in the playoffs and really just need bench help and need a guy who is like Lou Williams. So I wrote about this the other day that I was listening to the True Hoop podcast and Brian Windhorst had mentioned that basically the market for big men is like oversaturated, right? So we just saw DeMarcus Cousins get traded, but there's a ton of other bigs who have been linked to trades over the past, this season. And we'll see how many of them get moved before Thursday, but I'm going to guess that it's going to be not many, especially some of these high-priced ones. And so Windhorst was making the point that if you have a guard or a wing, that's where the demand is. And that you're probably going to be able to make a deal, and a favorable one at that, for your asset. And so I would imagine that Mitch is working the phones right now for Lou Williams, trying to figure out, and maybe other pieces that are on the team as well, maybe Nick Young, maybe Jordan Clarkson, to see what's out there and what could be had, just to try to maybe better balance the roster or get some other pieces who they might like more than the ones that they have, not only for the near term, but for the long term. What do you think?
So what with Lou, what is, let's do this as a draft pick because it's easier to quantify than, doing it, relative to the different players around the league. With Lou, what is the lowest draft pick that you would be willing to accept for him? And let's say everything else in the deal is not a very good player that's expiring at the end of the year that you include just for the purpose of making salaries work. So really the only asset of any value that the Lakers are getting back is that draft pick. Where's your point where you say, it'd just be better to keep Lou?
Oh man, if it's only a pick, I would probably say Washington.
So 24, nothing worse than than 24.
So I'm looking at the standings now, and the teams above Washington are the Clippers, the Celtics, the Rockets, who you mentioned earlier as a potential partner, the Cavs, the Spurs, and the Warriors, right? And so there's not a lot of natural partners in there anyway. It looks like the only other partner would be the Rockets. And so if I was making a deal with the Rockets, it would probably be for a player that's on their roster rather than, and I haven't looked at their roster close enough to see who I might want. But yeah, if you're only talking a pick, I would say Washington is around there. The Jazz are right there too. And so another interesting team is the Raptors, who are right now are 33-24. So I think if you're talking about anywhere from the late teens to the early 20s, I'd be comfortable with that. The interesting thing is for me though is that I'm much more interested in young players who are sort of flashing defensive potential as a target rather than necessarily only limiting ourselves to a draft pick.
So like who?
Willie Cauley-Stein. Now that was before.
I brought him up. Yeah,
right. Like that was before the Cousins trade, right? So now presumably Stein's going to, maybe become their starting center, right? As far as I know,
he might be the best player on that team. Right now.
But like a Nerlens Noel. Right,
sure.
Those are the types of guys that get mentioned a lot. But even a guy.
But can you get those kind of guys for Lou though? I mean, those guys seem a little bit, And I even brought up Willie Cauley-Stein when we, briefly touched on this 3 or 4 pods ago. But he's kind of. I don't want to say blown up, but he's not the third big off the bench.
No,
anymore,
he's been playing much better lately and sort of finding his niche. But I mentioned a guy like Oubre earlier. A lean wing athlete who has flashed defensive potential.
Love to get him.
Right, and so you were even talking about Houston. I don't think Houston does this, but I mean, would you trade Lou Williams for Patrick Beverley?
Beverley, he's a little bit older than I would want and has some injury history. I would say no on him. But what about Sam Decker?
Oh, yeah. See, Decker's an interesting guy to me because I think that he's mostly a 4.
Interesting.
I
could buy that.
And so, anyone who's basically a 4, even if I really like them.
Sure. Yeah, they've got to be so much better than Randall or Nance, and you're not going to get that kind of guy for Lou Williams, so it's kind of pointless.
It's even beyond that, I mean, I think that long term, you're even hoping that Ingram can play some 4, right? And so it's just complicated when you're looking at that position specifically, power forward, with the current construct that the Lakers have. See, I would trade for Beverley. Yeah, really? I would. I think that he's an ideal guy to play next to Russell.
Oh, I do too. In terms of his fit on the team, I just don't think he necessarily matches the timeline. His injury history scares me. And did he just re-up, or is he a free agent this year?
I'd have to look at that. Maybe.
Let me look that up.
But I mean,
go ahead. Give me your rationale, your Beverly rationale.
So I just think that Beverly is like a bulldog defensively. He will guard 1s or 2s, right? He might struggle against 2s because of his size, but he will get up in those guys. I think that he's a fantastic sort of practice player, too, to sort of throw up against some of the Lakers guards, to sort of harden their edges a little bit. And when I said that he's sort of the ideal player to play next to to Russell, he is a low usage defensive ace who can hit the three ball.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah. No, I totally get that.
He can initiate the offense enough, right? So that if you want to sort of have a couple of sets a game where they're sharing the floor, where Russell is sort of playing off the ball, and sort of you put him in that Nick Young slot and sort of run him off some screens. Beverly is more than capable of handling the ball up top, just like Ingram is, right, to sort of initiate the offense. I just think that there's very much in that sort of Derek Fisher championship team guy type of guy, right? Where it's like the ball is in Kobe's hands regardless. What do you really need out of that other backcourt guy? And what you need is tough defense, some leadership, and some good spot up shooting.
So I just looked up his salary. I had the impression that he had either signed a bad contract.
No, he's got a good deal, man.
Was going to be a free agent. He's on a really good deal, and
like $6 million a year or something like that, right?
Yeah, and it's like de-escalating, so it goes down each year. And
I don't think. I don't think the Rockets would do it just because.
I agree.
Like the same thing that we're describing that makes him appealing for the Lakers. He's double so for a team that's got the third best record in their conference, right? Like so. Let's be real there, but that's why I was saying that if you're trading with Houston, I don't want Corey Brewer, right, which works under the salary cap. Now maybe Trevor Ariza, but I think that the players Houston has, like, they're trying to give up non-playing pieces for a guy like Lou Williams, and they might.
We're looking to add, yeah.
They're not trying to detract from the formula that's made them what they are already, right? Like they want a guy where at any point during the game, they're like, okay, now we've got Harden and Aaron and Eric Gordon and Lou Williams all on the floor at the same time, potentially. Like, we're going to be unstoppable.
Yeah, I think Tom had something to add here.
I was just going to jump in and say that I've read multiple reports and heard that Patrick Beverley is basically the heart of the Rockets. He's kind of their de facto leader, whether or not they look to him on the court. Like he's looked to by the guys as the kind of guy that brings all sides together.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
That everyone looks up to. Yeah,
and that's so easy to picture. For sure.
I can see the Rockets trading Ariza or, Corey Brewer. Thank you.
Yeah, not interested in him, but
I'm not either. But I really don't see them getting rid of Beverly anytime soon.
No.
Yeah, no, you're probably right. You're probably right about that. So, yeah, these are difficult things to talk about regarding, specific Lakers because we don't know the offers that are out there. But for me, I would trade all the way down to now. Obviously, you seek out the best offer, but if we could get a first-round pick, even if it's the 30th pick, which the Cavs actually don't own their pick, it's Portland. So if Portland wanted to kind of get in the make a run at the 8th seed and try and improve from Shabazz Napier, and Lou might be a bit of a clunky fit with them because, as I've mentioned before, Lou is kind of the guy that, he takes over and your bench and, he is your bench and everything will revolve around what he does. So you're not going to be exactly, running your offense or whatever with when he's in the game, but that's an option, right? And I would even take something like Lou, for the 30th pick if that's what it came down to. I think that ultimately he's going to be more valuable, or that first round pick, whether it's in a future trade or the Lakers have been killing it at that point of the draft. Yeah. If they can get another guy like Nance, right, who's on just this ridiculous 4-year contract. If you can get another guy that's a contributor like that, I think that has more value that fits into your timeline than a guy like Lou Williams does. And I think Lou's been wonderful this year, but he just doesn't fit with the timeline that we're on.
Yeah, no, that's totally fair. And look, I've been hard on Lou, just because the specific things that I don't like about his game are the things that I really don't like about anyone's game. And so it's not like those things overshadow how good he's been to me, because clearly he's been like the Lakers' best player, right? Like, I mean, he's leading them in scoring. He's got a PER at like the All-Star level, right? Which isn't a small feat when you consider like how efficient he is as a shooter with his usage being as high as it is, right? So that's sort of like a trifecta for me. So it's like one thing to have this crazy usage and then have like a true shooting of like, 50. It's just like, oh, like whoop-de-doo, right? Like, so you're carrying a heavy load, but what are you really doing with that load besides like using possessions? Like Lou's got like a true shooting percentage of like over 60, right? It's like he's been really good. And I don't want to downplay that at all. It's just the things that he does that I don't like. I just really don't like them. And I think that similar to Kobe last year, I think that for the sake of some of the young players, I think you need to redistribute some of that usage to other guys, even if they're not ready to take it on yet.
Yeah, no, that's it's time for that deal to go down for sure. Do you foresee any other? Let's move on from Lou. Do you see Nick Young or any other surprise Laker piece? Do you see the Lakers in the market for any other type of deal along those lines?
It's hard to say with Young. He's got a player option for next year, and so I think on some levels that depresses his market from even what it was. And I've said this before, and I still stick to it, that I don't think Nick Young has much value around the league. I think his value is very specific to certain types of styles of play where he has like all this freedom to basically shoot whenever he wants, as long as he's playing, because shooting whenever he wants is built into the structure of the offensive attack, right? Like, he can shoot whenever he wants on the Lakers because the Lakers essentially play this sort of free-flowing offensive style, and they want him to shoot when he's open. It's like that is a core principle for their team. Like, shoot the ball when you are open. And he gets open a fair amount, whether it's coming off screens or whether it's because Russell's passing him the ball in nice spots. And so for a team like Houston, I think Nick Young would make sense. As like if the Lakers, you mentioned a Lou Williams fit with him, but I mean, Young would fit just as well there. I think he had a very good year under Mike D'Antoni, and I think if he went back and played for him again, it would be the same way. Where I think it starts to get interesting is whether or not the Lakers would actually pull the trigger on any of their young guys, and I don't really see that, but I would be putting out feelers for Clarkson if I were if I were running the team. That's just because Clarkson has already gotten paid, and and you should sort of see what's out there for a guy where you can get anywhere. Like you can get a $10 million player for Clarkson. You can get like a $14 million player for Clarkson, and so what would one of those guys look like? Who are those guys around the league? And would one of them be a better fit on this team, right? Like, so you still have Young, let's say you still have Lou Williams, but now you've cashed in Clarkson for maybe a different type of wing player.
I feel like if Clarkson's going to get moved, I think it's a lot more likely to happen over the course of the offseason.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
I think that there's motivation for the rest of the league to trade for a Lou Williams or a Nick Young, because you can immediately say, so Lou's value is, and I was talking to James Hollis last night about this, is Lou is his ideal fit is to go somewhere to a good playoff team that has a terrible bench, and that's like kind of a very specific combination, because a lot of times, a playoff team is and doesn't have a terrible bench because they're a playoff team, right? Or if they had a terrible bench, they wouldn't be a playoff team. But a team like Washington actually really does fit, where he can come in and just do the Lou things that Lou does, and he'd fit in very well there. Detroit is another team that, that comes to mind, and some of the other teams that we brought up. And then, as you touched on, a guy like Nick is easier to fit into what you do than Lou is, right? Where he doesn't have to dominate the ball, but he can run around screens and knock down shots, and really every offense that's worth a damn around the league runs actions that Nick Young could knock down an open three coming off of. And so, like you said, he's got that player option that he's almost certainly going to exercise to become a free agent. So I could totally see a team looking to trade for Nick and just try to get the last couple months and a playoff run out of him. I don't think the Lakers would get more than a second-round pick for him, but being that he's going to be a free agent at the end of the year anyway, I think it's probably worth doing if that's available. As for any of the young guys, Clarkson included, I just think that if you zoom out for what is the position that the Lakers are in a big picture sense, right, is they want to develop the young talent that they have and ideally keep the pick both this year and in 2019. And if you're trading Clarkson for a guy who makes in the 12 to 14 range, you're probably trading him for a decent player. And if not, you're not going to want him at the 12 and 14 range anyway. I think the Lakers are a lot more likely to be like, hey, if Lou is out of the picture, let's see if we can get some of rookie year Clarkson back. And we're going to have an article up on LakerFilmRoom.com within the week about kind of comparing Clarkson's rookie year and his ability to shot create and kind of just what's different from then to now, and see if we can get that guy back, right, when he's not playing next to Lou Williams and when he's having more of the point guard responsibilities that he had before. I personally think that's a better use of these last 23 or 24 games than trading him for some unnamed $12 to $14 million player that might get us another win or two, but at the expense of draft picks, and he's probably not a guy that you're going to need to develop.
No. All of that makes sense, and I think that ideally, what you're talking about with Clarkson, that does bear some fruit. I wouldn't say I'm skeptical's maybe too strong of a word for me on that, but.
I'm skeptical. That's not too strong a word for me.
But I do have reservations that that's what we'll see. Just because I don't think anything's really stopping him from playing that way now. Right? Like in terms of when he does get the ball, there's nothing stopping him from making, when he's running the pick and roll, from making the skip pass. There's nothing stopping him from hitting the roll man more than what he already does. There's nothing stopping him from right. doing a lot of the things that have been sort of regressions in his game now. And while I think it's fine to say, well, let's give him the ball more because Lou Williams is theoretically gone, and let's see what he does with it. Maybe we will see a shift. But he's had the opportunity. He's had the ball plenty. He's one of the Lakers, top, 3 or 4 guys in minutes played all year. So he's gotten his shots, theoretically and literally, right? Like he's got his shots.
Yeah. No argument with me there, man. I can see how playing alongside Lou Williams, might inspire more of a I gotta get my shots up
for sure.
While I still have the chance type of but you start getting pretty deep into excuse making territory at that point, if that's the perspective you're coming from. So that being said, I do think that that's probably a better usage of the last 24 games and trading for kind of an unnamed guy. Go ahead,
there was just one last thing that I wanted to pivot to because I know we're getting a little bit long on time. But so Mozgov is no longer playing, and Dang is essentially a reserve. And one of the things that I've put out there to folks is, what would you be willing? So I think the Lakers should be looking to trade these guys, right? You you can't release them, and so I guess I'd be happier to keep Dang than Mozgov, but let's just say they should be open to trading both. And I'm wondering, and I put this out to Twitter, and I'm interested to know what you think about this. Is what would you be willing to attach to either of those guys in order to facilitate a deal where you basically get out from under their deals? If either not necessarily an expiring contract, but a contract that maybe ends, like 2 years earlier. So after next season, the contract would end. I got some interesting answers to this question, and so I'm wondering what you think.
So this is associated with how much money the Lakers currently have available and how much they'd be freeing up in the process of making a deal like that. So I would trade Clarkson if I could get out from under one of those two deals. I would do that now, and a year from now, I would trade Randall to do one of those. And I know that sounds like a lot, and it's painful to I can hear you chuckling in the background, man.
It is a lot, I'm sort of nodding my head, but go on.
And the reason being is that by gauging the free, so you want to get something out of losing an asset in exchange for freeing up cap space, right? So you trade a guy like Clarkson to free up and to attach him to Dang or Mozgov, but you don't do it just for the hell of it. You do it because you've got a free agent target or two that you've got lined up. Lakers have right around a max contract available this summer, and there probably aren't enough max contract guys available that would be willing to sign with the Lakers. So just a purposeless hey, let's get out of this deal, it has to be followed, in my opinion, immediately by and this is what we use the money on instead. Now, that's less of an issue now than it is 2 years from now, when 2018, where you have several guys, Paul George being one of them.
Westbrook's,
Westbrook's going to be another. Cousins is going to be another. Now, mind you, all of these guys, are likely going to have the option to extend, probably with the exception of George, under the new CBA, and have a crap load more money on the table from their existing team within that extension. So, holding out for those guys is probably foolish. However, the point remains is that you're gonna you're gonna need a reason to use that money, not just save it for a rainy day, and that's the time to do that. You also have Randall at that point coming up on his extension, and he goes from being so at the end of that 4-year contract that all rookies sign, all first round picks sign, you got to know who they are. You got to have a pretty good idea of who they are. And if Randall is someone who's worthy of a really big multi-year extension at that point, that's great. That's the best case scenario for the Lakers. But if he bears resemblance to the player that he is at this point, in my opinion, it's not worth it. And he becomes a negative asset at that point that you're overpaying. So is that you said you were nodding your head in agreement, but would you go so far as Randall?
Probably not. He's right on the verge, though. Because basically what we're talking about is salary dumps.
Yeah.
Which it's hard for me to say that, it's one thing to say, let's trade Randall as part of a deal that's going to get you, a bona fide, if not an actual all-star, right, who plays in the game, but someone who's sort of at that level. And so you package Randall with other pieces, but he's sort of, a focal point for that type of deal. It's one thing to say, let's do it for that. It's another thing to say, let's do it for a chance to sign a guy in free agency because we get in the room with them, right? Like the ones,
No.
Yeah.
You don't do that.
It's
you
like
don't do that.
a bird in the hand versus, two in the bush. And
yes.
So that's why I'm not sure if I would do it with Randall. I probably would with Clarkson. But, that's complicated by Clarkson making so much more money, right? Like, you can trade... Sure. So, in theory, you could say, oh, I'm going to trade Luol Deng and Julius Randle for Derrick Rose, right? Rose is an expiring contract this year, and
yeah, I don't
right,
do that.
I mean, in theory, you could do something like that though, and suddenly you're rid of 3 more years of like huge money to a guy, and so that's enticing in a lot of ways. It was the reason why I put the question to you though is because when I put that out to Twitter, pretty much 80% of the responses I got back were a mix of Clarkson and Randall. A couple of people said Nance. I'm sure you'd be strangling those people, right?
No. It depends. Like to me, so we've got one max, or we can get there fairly easily. Got offers. So say Paul George in 18, right? And we've got enough cap space to get Paul George. But Paul George wants more than what the Lakers currently have on the roster. And we've got to go, and we've got, someone else, say it's Westbrook or Cousins, right? That they're totally interested. We just don't have the money available for him. Like, if you've got a guy, go get him. Do what you got to do, move it. And that's kind of the perspective I'm coming from. And if that means trading Larry Nance, are you kidding me? Sure. Yes, of course you trade Larry Nance. You know what I mean? But I don't move a young asset, maybe with the exception of Clarkson. I would do it just maybe without having a guy lined up. I think I'd do that for Clarkson, but I wouldn't do that for Randall. But yeah, it's so contextual in that respect, right? Where you kind of need to have that extra guy lined up, and if that's the case, you do what you got to do to get him. The one last thing I wanted to say about this point in particular is the irony of the Deng and Mozgov deals is that they're going to be expiring probably right around the time the Lakers are contenders again. If you look at this at a reasonable timeline, now if they can get a Paul George and or a Russell Westbrook, obviously that changes the calculus. But just in terms of like the natural progression of when guys are starting to enter their prime and all, our current young core, if enough of them work out, yada yada, 2020 is probably when we're in that conversation again. And it'll be interesting if that's with those guys coming off of the books, if there's space for that extra max contract as a function of all of that money being tied up. So that's the silverest freaking lining I've maybe ever come up with. But
yeah,
well,
honestly, when those guys were signed, it was one of the reasons why I said that their timeline didn't matter to me as much. That one of the main arguments that I got a lot from folks was, well, these guys are old, and why do you want to sign old guys when you can have young guys? Wouldn't it be better to sign like Bismack Biyombo, right? Who is young theoretically. I say that in jest a little bit, right? But I mean,
sure.
He's like 24 or something like that. And so why wouldn't you want to sign a guy like that to play with 22-year-old Randall and 21-year-old Russell? And I said,
I was one of those people making that argument, by the way.
That's totally fine. It's totally fine to say that. And if that would have been the guy that they signed, I would have been happy with that. The fact is that they didn't, and then I readjust my thinking. Right? Does that mean that it's a bad thing that these guys are older? Yes and no. And one of the reasons why I was saying no was because their timeline actually doesn't matter within the context of when these young guys are actually starting to be good and maybe actually showing to be draws in the free agent market, those guys can either be traded because they're in the last year of their contract, or be stretched via the stretch provision, right? Or they'll be coming off the books that year, right? And so yes, I guess it would have been good to sort of have this younger piece to sort of grow with these young guys, but I also think that there's value in having sort of these grown men, veteran voices around who actually have experience to sort of extend to the younger players, and hopefully that helps them grow, right? Like so I think there's two sides to the coin, and so I just wanted to bring that up, that the point that you're making to me sort of speaks to that sort of line of thinking as well, which I endorsed at the time, not to support, like not to sort of say, oh, it's totally fine to sign these guys to these deals, because those deals were bad at the time. And I don't think there was any sort of like spinning that. But when you're talking about like looking for positives, that's one of them. And I see that. So
yeah, at the end of the day, it's probably not going to matter a whole lot. So
yeah, so Darius, on Wednesday when we called the game against the Suns, at the end of the first half, Deangelo Russell made a nice move, and that kind of led into our entertaining halftime discussion about Deangelo Russell. Did you check that out?
I did.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask you what your thoughts were on that, and it just kind of letting us know what you think. I mean, Pete was pretty passionate in his response. It was very entertaining. But I think he made some interesting points, and I was curious to see your reaction about that.
So I actually tweeted at the time that when Russell made that play, that's just like, yes, like that's exactly the play that he needs to make more, right? like I want to see that more, that sort of change of pace and sort of that attacking the big, coming off of the screen and sort of like not settling and like getting downhill. Russell has some size. He's not a small dude. He may not be super athletic, but you don't need to be super athletic to sort of like dip your shoulder, create a little bit of space, or throw a little bit of hesitation, either like a stutter step or a little pause or like an inside out dribble, which is what I think he hit the guy with at that point, and get to the rim, right? And so, yeah, I was 100% on board with what Pete was saying at that point to, like, yes, let's do this more, right? How about the next time we try it again, and maybe the next time after that too? Because I think even if he fails at doing that, it's good that he's even trying, because lately he hasn't even been trying to do that, right? Like I'm not going to get all angry about it right now, but I mean, yeah, it's sort of frustrating to see him sort of like live in the rut that he's been in terms of actually attempting shots in the paint, right? Like he's been getting to the paint a little bit, but he's mostly been passing, or he's been shooting that little floater that he's been missing, which is fine. Like I think that floater is going to start to fall, but I actually want him to sort of use that length a little bit, right? Like we talk about Ingram and sort of taking that long stride and sort of extending and getting all the way to the backboard where he can put the ball against the glass and finish. And Russell can do that too, right? Like, and some of being able to do that is actually practicing that and doing it at game speed in game situations and working on the steps to actually get you from point A to point B to point C where you're at the rim and finishing, or at least attempting a shot. And so, yes, like you know, all the colorful language aside that Pete was throwing out there and all the suggestions on what he should be doing in bed at night. Right? Those are that was fun, right? And I'm laughing about it now just thinking about it. I was tweeting it out that I was laughing about all the freakins, right? It was very much like it was like a Jodeci song, right? But the essence of what Pete was saying, I'm 100% with him. I also enjoyed you shutting down the trolls. Right? So every once in a while.
Just can't we I just want to be able to have a conversation in between trade Kendall Marshall and I think that Deangelo Russell is a future superstar. Is that so much to ask? Like that's the thing is I had some people tweeting at me in the aftermath of that oh God, you just gave the haters so much fuel. No, they're gonna be like that as they are. And if you have followed me for more than 5 seconds, you know that I think very highly of the kid. It also doesn't mean that I think that he's necessarily a future superstar in the league. It's going to be the next Harden or Curry. I think in very best case scenarios of what he could be, yeah, maybe somewhere in there, but very rarely do we hit our best case scenarios. But I want to be able to, and for him, there's something about him specifically that makes that conversation so hard. And it's either Kendall Marshall 2.0, he's a bust, or you think he's a superstar. But oftentimes it's according to those people that think he's a bust. I can't just think he's a really good young player. It has to be this wild dichotomy. Anyway,
No, keep going. We're gonna post this one too. No,
I know. No. Yeah, I know. All right. And on that note, we're out of time. So, as always, I'm Pete from Laker Film Room, joined by my brother Tom and Darius Soriano over at Form Blue and Gold. You can catch me on Twitter at Laker Film Room, Darius at Form Blue and Gold, and Tommy at LFR Tommy. So, all right, folks. Hopefully, we've got some interesting trades to discuss at this time next week. We'll catch you then.